The whispers followed Katherine Reynolds like shadows in the dusty streets of Promise Creek, a small settlement nestled in the foothills of Colorado Territory. 1876. She walked with her head high despite the murmurs that trailed behind her, clutching her market basket tighter as she passed the general store where three women abruptly ceased their conversation to stare. "Morning, ladies," Katherine said, her voice steady despite the familiar knot in her stomach. They nodded stiffly, their eyes following her as she continued down the boardwalk. Katherine had grown accustomed to this treatment over the past 6 months, ever since she'd stumbled into town with wild tales of gold and betrayal that no one believed. She'd arrived with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a story so fantastical the townspeople had labeled her a liar or worse, delusional. The warm May sunshine did little to brighten her mood as she made her way to Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, where she'd secured a small attic room in exchange for cooking and cleaning. It wasn't much, but it was shelter while she figured out what to do next. "Miss Reynolds," a deep voice called from behind her. Katherine turned to see Sheriff Daniels approaching, his gray mustache twitching with what looked like discomfort. "Sheriff," she acknowledged with a polite nod. "Got something for you," he said, extending a telegram. "Came in this morning." She accepted it with surprise. No one knew she was in Promise Creek, at least no one who would send a telegram. She unfolded it and read quickly, her face paling. "Bad news?" the sheriff asked, not unkindly. "My father's lawyer," Katherine said, her voice faint. "The men who stole my father's claim, they're coming here." Sheriff Daniels sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through his thinning hair. "Miss Reynolds, we've been through this. There's no proof of any stolen claim or murder. Your father's death was ruled an accident by authorities in San Francisco. They lied." Katherine's voice rose, drawing looks from passers-by. "The Morgan brothers killed him for his gold map and left me for dead, and now they've tracked me here." The sheriff replaced his hat, his expression hardening. "Miss Reynolds, I won't have you stirring up trouble in my town with these wild accusations. There's no map, no gold, and no murderers coming after you." He leaned closer. "Folk here are starting to think you're touched in the head. I suggest you stop with these stories before Mrs. Fletcher decides she doesn't want a lunatic under her roof." Katherine's cheeks burned with humiliation as the sheriff tipped his hat and walked away. She crumpled the telegram in her fist, fighting back tears. No one believed her, not about her father's murder, not about the gold map he died protecting, and not about the danger that was now headed straight for Promise Creek. As she turned to continue toward the boarding house, she collided with a solid wall of a man, stumbling backward. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her. "Whoa there, careful now." Katherine looked up into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen. They belonged to a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath a well-worn Stetson. His clothes were dusty from the trail, marking him as a newcomer. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping back quickly. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "No harm done," he replied with a slight smile. "Quincy Yates, madam, just rode into town." He extended a hand. Katherine hesitated before taking it. "Katherine Reynolds." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Reynolds," he repeated. "Would you happen to be related to Howard Reynolds?" Katherine stiffened. "He was my father." "How did you know him?" Quincy glanced around at the busy street. "Perhaps we could talk somewhere more private. I've been on the trail a while and could use some coffee if you'd be willing to join me." Katherine studied him warily. "How did you know my father, Mr. Yates?" "I was with him in the Sierra Nevadas last fall," Quincy said quietly. "Before he headed to San Francisco with his discovery." Katherine's heart raced. For the first time since arriving in Promise Creek, she'd found someone who might believe her story. Still, caution kept her guard up. The Golden Nugget serves decent coffee, she said, nodding toward the small cafe across the street. Inside the cafe, they settled at a corner table away from other patrons. After ordering coffee, Quincy leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Your father spoke of you often, Miss Reynolds. Said you were waiting in San Francisco while he confirmed his find." His eyes darkened. "When I heard he died in an accident, something didn't sit right." Catherine's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "It wasn't an accident. The Morgan brothers, James and William, they'd been following him. They attacked us at our hotel, took his map, and left us both for dead." She swallowed hard. "I survived. My father didn't." Quincy nodded slowly. "I feared as much. The Morgans have a reputation. They've jumped more than one claim, but they're careful never leave evidence." "You believe me?" Katherine asked, disbelief and hope mingling in her voice. "I do," Quincy replied, his gaze steady. "Your father showed me enough to know his find was genuine. We were partners for a time until our paths separated in Nevada. I went north while he headed to San Francisco." He paused. "I've been tracking the Morgans since I heard about your father. That's what brought me to Promise Creek." Katherine glanced around nervously. "They're coming here. I just received a telegram. My father's lawyer warned me they've discovered my location." Quincy's expression hardened. "Then we don't have much time. Do you have any proof of what they did? Anything that could convince the sheriff to help?" Katherine shook her head. "Only my word. And in this town, that's worth less than dirt." Bitterness crept into her voice. "They think I'm just a delusional woman spinning tales for attention." A man approached their table, the cafe owner, a portly fellow with suspicious eyes. "Everything all right here, Miss Reynolds? This man bothering you?" "No, Mr. Parker," Katherine assured him. "Mr. Yates is an old friend of my father's." Parker snorted. "Friend of your father's, eh? Come to help look for that imaginary gold." He didn't bother lowering his voice, and several patrons turned to listen. Katherine flushed with embarrassment, but Quincy merely smiled. "Howard Reynolds was a fine man and an honest one," he said calmly. "I'd be careful about calling a dead man a liar, especially when you didn't know him." Parker's face reddened. "Don't need outsiders coming in and causing trouble. We've had enough tall tales in this town." He stomped away, muttering under his breath. "I see what you mean about your standing here," Quincy said quietly. Catherine's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I should have kept moving, but I ran out of money. Now I'm trapped here, waiting for the men who murdered my father to find me." Quincy reached across the table, his hand stopping short of touching hers. "Miss Reynolds, I made your father a promise that if anything happened to him, I'd look out for you. I intend to keep that promise. Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" "Because I believe in honoring my word," he said simply. "And because I've seen what the Morgan brothers can do, they need to be stopped." For the first time in months, Katherine felt a flicker of hope. "What can we do? No one will believe us without proof." "Then we'll get proof," Quincy said, determination in his eyes. "Starting with finding a copy of that map." Katherine frowned. "The original is gone. They took it when they attacked us." "Your father was a careful man," Quincy explained. "He wouldn't have kept just one copy. Think, Miss Reynolds. Did he have any hiding places? Special books? Anything he valued that might conceal a duplicate?" Katherine thought hard, remembering her father's habits. "His pocket watch," she whispered suddenly. "He always kept it with him, said it was his good luck charm. After he died, the hotel manager gathered my father's personal effects. The watch should be among them, stored with Mrs. Fletcher." "Then that's where we start," Quincy said, leaving coins on the table for their coffee. "Let's go see about that watch." As they walked toward the boarding house, Katherine was acutely aware of the stares following them. Promise Creek was small enough that a newcomer attracted attention, especially one walking with the town's most notorious resident. "People are watching," she murmured. "Let them," Quincy replied. "I've never much cared what others think." At the boarding house, Mrs. Fletcher regarded them with suspicion. A stern widow in her 50s, she ran her establishment with rigid rules and a sharp tongue. "Gentlemen callers in the parlor only, Miss Reynolds, and only until 8 in the evening," she reminded Katherine. "This is Mr. Yates, an associate of my father's," Katherine explained. "We need to retrieve something from my father's belongings, his pocket watch." Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. "More talk of that gold business. Mr. Yates, you should know Miss Reynolds has quite the imagination." Quincy removed his hat, offering his most charming smile. "Madam, I'd be obliged if you'd allow Miss Reynolds to check her father's effects. It's a matter of sentiment more than anything else." Mrs. Fletcher hesitated, then sighed. "Very well. The trunk is in the storage room, but I'll be checking to make sure nothing else goes missing." In the cramped storage room, Katherine located the small trunk containing her father's remaining possessions. She sifted through the items: a worn Bible, some letters, a few articles of clothing, until her fingers closed around the silver pocket watch. "This is it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She ran her thumb over the engraved initials. "HR, may I?" Quincy asked gently. Katherine handed him the watch. Quincy examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands before attempting to open the back panel. It resisted at first, then popped open to reveal a small folded paper tucked inside. Katherine gasped. "He did make a copy." Quincy carefully extracted the paper, unfolding it to reveal a detailed map with annotations in Howard Reynolds' neat handwriting. "This is it," he confirmed, his voice low with excitement. "This is what the Morgans are after." "What does it mean?" Katherine asked, leaning closer. "Your father found a vein of gold in an overlooked canyon," Quincy explained. "According to this, it's about 3 days' ride from here in the foothills. The location's disguised as ordinary landmarks, but with the key your father included here, it's clear as day." A noise from the doorway made them both look up. Mrs. Fletcher stood watching them, suspicion etched on her face. "Found what you were looking for?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the paper in Quincy's hands. "Yes, thank you," Katherine said, as Quincy carefully folded the map and tucked it into his vest pocket. "Just some notes my father kept." Mrs. Fletcher clearly didn't believe them but stepped aside to let them pass. "Dinner's at 6 sharp, Miss Reynolds. Don't be late for your kitchen duties." Once outside, Katherine turned to Quincy. "What now? The Morgans could arrive any day." "We need to file a claim on that land before they can," Quincy said. "But first, we need to convince Sheriff Daniels of the danger. This map is evidence your father's discovery was real, but we need more to prove the Morgans murdered him." "The sheriff won't help," Katherine said bitterly. "He thinks I'm crazy." "Then we'll change his mind," Quincy replied. "I have a friend in Denver, a federal marshal. I can wire him, ask him to look into the Morgans' activities in San Francisco. If there's evidence to be found, he'll find it." "That could take days," Katherine worried. "The Morgans will be here before then." Quincy's expression turned grim. "Then we'll have to be ready for them." Over the next 2 days, Quincy became a fixture in Promise Creek. He took a room at the hotel, spent time at the saloon gathering information, and made a point of being seen with Katherine around town. The whispers increased, but Katherine found them easier to bear with Quincy at her side. On the morning of the 3rd day, Katherine was sweeping the boarding house porch when she spotted them 2 men on horseback at the edge of town, their features hidden beneath the brims of their hats. Even at a distance, she recognized them. The Morgan brothers had arrived. Katherine rushed inside to find Quincy, who had come to escort her to the telegraph office. "They're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Quincy's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Stay inside. I'll handle this. No, Katherine grabbed his arm. They don't know you're involved. If they see you confronting them, they'll know something's wrong. She took a deep breath. I need to act normally, go about my day. We need to see what they do first. Quincy frowned. I don't like using you as bait. It's not bait if I'm already the target, Katherine pointed out. Besides, they won't try anything in broad daylight, not without knowing if I still have the map. Reluctantly, Quincy agreed. But I'll be watching. And tonight we'll go to the sheriff with whatever reply we get from Denver. Throughout the day, Katherine felt the Morgans' eyes on her as she moved around town. They made no attempt to approach her, instead establishing themselves at the saloon, asking casual questions about the town and its residents. By evening, the wire from Denver had arrived. Quincy collected it from the telegraph office, his face grim as he read its contents. My friend found witnesses, he told Katherine as they walked toward the sheriff's office. Hotel staff who saw the Morgans entering your father's room the night he died. They were afraid to come forward, but my friend convinced them. It's not ironclad proof, but it's enough to warrant an investigation. Sheriff Daniels was skeptical when they presented their evidence, but the telegram from a federal marshal gave him pause. Even if what you say is true, he said slowly, I can't arrest men for a crime committed in San Francisco, not without official papers. We're not asking you to arrest them yet, Quincy said. Just keep an eye on them, and when my friend arrives with the formal documents, be ready to help. The sheriff sighed. I'll watch them, but no promises beyond that. As Katherine and Quincy left the sheriff's office, the setting sun cast long shadows across the main street. The saloon across the way was alive with light and noise. I should get back to the boarding house, Katherine said. Mrs. Fletcher will be looking for me to help with dinner. I'll walk you, Quincy insisted. They hadn't gone more than a block when Katherine spotted one of the Morgan brothers, William, the younger one leaning against a hitching post ahead, directly in their path. Well, look who it is, William drawled, straightening as they approached. Katherine Reynolds, been looking for you, girl. Quincy stepped slightly in front of Katherine, his stance casual but alert. Evening, friend, don't believe we've been introduced. William's eyes narrowed. Don't recall asking to meet you, stranger. My business is with the lady. Any business with the lady includes me, Quincy replied, his voice pleasant but firm. William's hand drifted toward his gun. Is that so? And who might you be? Before Quincy could answer, James Morgan emerged from between two buildings, effectively boxing them in. Problem, Will? James asked, his cold eyes assessing Quincy. This fella seems to think he has a say in our business with Miss Reynolds, William explained, a sneer curling his lip. James studied Quincy more carefully. You look familiar, mister. Have we crossed paths before? Don't believe we have, Quincy said evenly. Name's Quincy Yates. I'm a friend of the Reynolds family. Recognition dawned in James' eyes. Yates, you were Howard's partner in the Sierras. His expression darkened. Seems you've got a habit of sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. And you have a habit of taking what isn't yours, Quincy replied, all pretense of pleasantry gone. Careful now, James warned. Making accusations like that could be unhealthy. It's not an accusation when there's proof, Katherine said, finding her voice. We know what you did to my father. James laughed, a cold sound that sent chills down Katherine's spine. Do you now? And what exactly do you think you know? We know enough to have contacted a federal marshal, Quincy said. He'll be here in 2 days with witnesses and warrants for your arrest. The brothers exchanged glances. That's a shame, James said, because we won't be here that long. Neither will you, Miss Reynolds, once you've given us what we want. I don't have anything you want, Katherine insisted. Don't play games, William snapped. The map, your father's map, we know he made a copy. Even if she had it, what makes you think she'd give it to you? Quincy challenged. James's hand moved to his gun. Because she's a smart girl who values her life, unlike her father. The casual admission of murder spoken on a public street stunned Katherine. You're admitting it, just like that, James shrugged. No one in this town believes a word you say anyway. By morning we'll be gone, and you'll be nothing but a sad story if you're even remembered at all. That's where you're wrong, came a new voice. Sheriff Daniels stepped out of the shadows, his gun already drawn. I believe I've heard enough. The Morgan brothers froze, caught off guard by the sheriff's appearance. This doesn't concern you, Sheriff, James said, recovering quickly. Just a private disagreement. Sounded like a confession to murder and a threat to me, Sheriff Daniels replied. And that very much concerns me. Hands where I can see them, gentlemen. William tensed, his hand hovering near his gun. You're making a mistake. The only mistake would be reaching for that iron, the sheriff warned. I don't need Denver's permission to arrest men for threatening citizens in my town. For a tense moment, it seemed William might draw anyway. Then James gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Both brothers slowly raised their hands. This isn't over, James hissed at Katherine as the sheriff approached to disarm them. Actually, it is, Quincy countered. The marshal's bringing paperwork, but he also wired ahead to every law office in the territory with your descriptions and the charges against you. You're finished, whether you face justice here or in San Francisco. As Sheriff Daniels led the Morgan brothers away, a small crowd of onlookers had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Among them were several townspeople who had been most vocal in doubting Katherine's story. Miss Reynolds, one woman called out hesitantly. Is it true, then? About your father and the gold? Katherine looked at the woman, Mrs. Parker, the cafe owner's wife, who had once openly called Katherine a liar. Every word, she replied simply. The woman had the grace to look ashamed. Others in the crowd murmured among themselves, casting apologetic glances Katherine's way. Quincy placed a gentle hand on Katherine's shoulder. You've been vindicated, he said quietly. How does it feel? Katherine looked around at the town that had scorned her, then back to the man who had stood by her when no one else would. Hollow, she admitted. I'd trade it all to have my father back. He'd be proud of you, Quincy assured her. You never gave up, even when it would have been easier to walk away. In the days that followed, everything changed. The federal marshal arrived from Denver with formal charges against the Morgan brothers, who were transported to face trial for Howard Reynolds' murder. The evidence was substantial enough that few doubted they would be convicted. Katherine found herself transformed from town pariah to local celebrity. The same people who had mocked her now sought her company, eager to hear the true story of Howard Reynolds' discovery and his daughter's quest for justice. 2 weeks after the Morgans' arrest, Katherine stood on the boardwalk outside the general store, watching as workers loaded supplies onto a wagon. Quincy approached, leading his saddled horse. All set, he asked, a smile warming his features. Katherine nodded. Everything we need for the journey. She glanced at the wagon. Are you sure about this, filing the claim jointly? Your father would have wanted it that way, Quincy said. Partners to the end, that was our agreement. He hesitated. Unless you'd prefer to go it alone, I'd understand. Katherine shook her head. No, I want you with me. You're the only one who believed in me when it mattered. Mrs. Fletcher appeared, carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Provisions for your trip, she explained, handing it to Katherine with an apologetic smile. And perhaps a peace offering for doubting you. Thank you, Katherine said, accepting the basket. As Mrs. Fletcher walked away, more townspeople approached to wish them well on their journey to claim Howard Reynolds' discovery. The change in attitude was striking. but Katherine found it difficult to fully embrace their newfound support. "Something troubling you?" Quincy asked as they stepped away from the crowd. "They're all so friendly now," Katherine said quietly. "Now that they know the gold is real." Quincy's expression grew serious. "People are fickle, especially when fortune's involved." "But you don't owe them anything, Katherine. Not your forgiveness, not your gold, not even your presence if you choose to leave." "What about you?" she asked, meeting his gaze. "Why did you believe me when no one else would?" Quincy smiled slightly. "I knew your father. He wasn't a man given to fantasy or exaggeration. And when I met you—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "There was a truth in your eyes that couldn't be manufactured." Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks under his steady gaze. Over the past weeks, their partnership had evolved into something deeper, though neither had put it into words. "There's something else," she said. "All those times I walked through town with everyone whispering, calling me a liar or worse. I kept my head high, but inside I was breaking. I felt so alone." Quincy took her hand, his touch gentle. "You're not alone anymore." They stood there in silence for a moment, the busy street fading around them. "We should get going if we want to make good time before nightfall," Quincy finally said. As they prepared to depart, Sheriff Daniels approached. "Miss Reynolds, Mr. Yates, a moment before you go." He handed Katherine an official-looking document. "Filing for your claim, all in order. Once you've verified the location, just sign and return this to the territorial office in Denver." "Thank you, Sheriff," Katherine said, genuinely grateful for his help since the confrontation with the Morgans. "Safe travels," he replied. "And perhaps consider returning to Promise Creek when you've established your mine. We could use solid citizens like you too." As they rode out of town, Katherine looked back at Promise Creek, the place that had mocked and shunned her, yet now stood as the site of her vindication. The future stretched before them, full of possibility. "What are you thinking?" Quincy asked, riding beside her. "I'm thinking about what the sheriff said about coming back," she replied. "I'm not sure I belong here anymore." "You belong wherever you choose," Quincy said. "The question is, where do you want to be?" Katherine considered this. "With my father gone, I don't have ties to any particular place. But I do know I want to honor his discovery, make something of it." "We will," Quincy promised. "And whatever you decide after that, I'll support you." He hesitated, then added, "If you'll have me, that is." Katherine looked at him, this man who had risked everything to help her, who had believed when no one else would. "What exactly are you offering, Quincy Yates?" He guided his horse closer to hers, his eyes serious. "Partnership, for starters, in the mine, in life, in whatever comes next." He took a deep breath. "I know it hasn't been long, but I've come to care for you, Katherine, more than I thought possible in such a short time." Katherine felt a warmth bloom in her chest. "I care for you too." "The town mocked your story," Quincy said softly. "Let my name be the one that stands for yours from now on. Marry me, Katherine. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. When we've built something together." Tears filled Katherine's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. For the first time since losing her father, she felt truly hopeful about the future. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Quincy Yates." He leaned across the space between their horses to kiss her, a gentle promise of what was to come. 3 months later, they returned to Promise Creek as husband and wife, the successful owners of the Reynolds-Yates mine. The town that had once shunned Katherine now welcomed them as respected citizens, though neither forgot how quickly public opinion could turn. They built a home on the edge of town, close enough for convenience but far enough for privacy. And when people asked about Katherine's incredible story, Quincy would always smile and say, "My wife doesn't need to explain herself to anyone. Her truth has always been enough for me." In time, Promise Creek grew into a prosperous community, with the Reynolds-Yates mine providing stable employment and the couple themselves becoming respected leaders. They established a school and insisted on fair treatment for all residents, regardless of background. On their 5th anniversary, sitting on the porch of their home with their young son playing nearby, Katherine turned to Quincy. "Do you ever regret it, standing by me when everyone thought I was mad?" Quincy took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band he'd fashioned himself from the first nuggets they'd extracted from her father's claim. "Not for a single moment. Some treasures are worth more than gold, Katherine. You taught me that." As the sun set over Promise Creek, Katherine rested her head on her husband's shoulder, secure in the knowledge that in a town that had once mocked her, she had found not just vindication, but love that would stand the test of time.